the Northwest home for paranormal. You're listening to U.S. Phenomenon with your host, Mario Magana.
From the Pacific Northwest in the shadow of the 1962 World's Fair, this space, good evening, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are on God's green earth. This is U.S. Phenomenon. I am your host, Mario Magana, and tonight we explore the extraordinary and the unexplained. I mean, with everything that's been going on in the conspiracy world, some of the top conspiracies that are kind of on the loose right now, everything from the DC plane crash to the drones. Tonight, our special guest and a huge contributor to U.S. Phenomenon, Michael Parker, will join us to give us some insightfulness and his analysis and engaging stories that he's been kind of working on. And he's always been provoking his own personal content that he's been working on with Michael Parker Media as well, with his own podcast and whatnot. He's been a contributor to the U.S. Phenomenon for such a long time, always giving his insightfulness and providing high quality analysis, staying engaged and informed, whether it's from way wild stuff to maybe delving into the historical mysteries and the unexplained, and even touching on current events and giving his highlights to human interest as well. It is always my pleasure to welcome to U.S. Phenomenon, Michael Parker. Welcome back to the show.
Hi, Mario. How's it going? Thanks for having me back.
Well, Happy New Year's. It's been a while since we've had you on the show. Oh, it's fantastic. Thank you. Tons of stuff going on in the world. I mean, planes are falling out of the sky. You got these. It just seems like a lot. You got the drone situation. You have, to me, so much going on in the world of conspiracy. The JFK files that are going to finally be released. And in our line of business, for someone like myself, are like, maybe we don't want those files out just yet, because once they're out, then we're like, well, what's left to speculate and kind of converse and chat about, all tongue in cheek. I'm like, is this a great thing? Of course it is, because at the bottom line, we want to figure out what actually happened in these files. And then we can always go back and look at it. The conspiracies will always be there till the end of dawn and till the end of time. But when you look at this from, the drones that have been, happened prior to administration and not getting, what was going on in regards, it's quite interesting why people wouldn't share that. And I know that in past conversations that I've had, people always come to me and like, well, what's your thoughts on that? With the drones. And I was like, come on, let's be real about this. You don't think the United States government doesn't know? I was like, here's my thoughts on it. And I'll get yours. Those drones, to me, maybe there was something going on out there in the United States that the United States didn't want us to know. That could have been, alarming. So instead of having fighter jets up there, wouldn't it be more cost effective to have drones patrol the skies to see what was going on, to keep an eye on the skies, to see if there was stuff going on out there, versus having military jets pacing around at an extremely high volume of money being wasted, and alarming people, saying, oh my God, something's going on, we're about to be attacked. I mean, that was my insight in regards to that. And I, kind of shared that off. This was something offsite when people would ask, and just in passing conversations in regards to, well, what is it? And I was like, well, the government's got to know. The government definitely has to know what's going on. And I know it's been some time, and I know that President Trump has come out and said that, yes, the FAA was known about this and had some insight to what was going on, but not much else has been shared about that. Michael, what's your thoughts about what was going on during that time with those drones patrolling the skies?
Well, it's super curious. And I started covering the drones in like October, before the big flurry of activity in New Jersey happened. And I'm trying to find my old video, and I'm slightly embarrassed. I'm trying to remember this gentleman's name that was my guest. He was a retired colonel. I believe it was Colonel John Mills. Anyway, he had worked both in cybersecurity and in the military. And at the time, towards the end of October, we were talking about this because the drone strike kind of incursion didn't start this year. Actually, a year ago, December of 2023, 17 nights in a row, drones flew over Langley Air Force Base and that whole cluster of military installations on the East Coast. Now, let me say that again, 17 nights in a row. And okay, so you're telling me this is one of the most heavily guarded, highly secure areas within the United States. And for 17 nights in a row, unidentified unmanned aircraft flew in and around these facilities for 70 nights in a row. And we could not get any information on where they were coming from, who owned them, exactly what they were. So that's 2023.
Yeah.
Then move forward to this past year. All of a sudden, we begin to have drones seen all over the East Coast, especially New Jersey, beginning in November, moving through December. And at the time, they were beginning to close certain military air bases and things because these things were being seen so much by so many people, and not just in New Jersey, but this was happening in multiple states and in other countries. And to your point, yeah, I think a lot of us thought, well, surely the government knows what this is. And you know what? They're probably our technology. But we couldn't get any definite information on what these were. And if you remember, some of these drones were said to be the size of SUVs. Like those are really big drones.
For
Okay.
sure. For sure.
I've never seen a drone that big. And some people were trying to say, oh, well, we do have those drones that are that big. And they were pointing to this super secret, I think it's the X3 spacecraft that we launched years ago. And nobody really knows what it does. I think it came from DARPA and it does these military projects. It circumnavigates the globe at high altitudes. And every now and then we bring it back and then we send it back. Anyway, it looks kind of like a flying submarine or something. It's just kind of like a tube, right? Okay.
Right.
All right. Fair enough. You can classify that as a drone. I guess, yeah, that's what it is. But to have them close to the ground and they're flying over people's houses and cars and they're flying over military installations and air bases, not just in New Jersey, but as I said, in multiple different states and in other countries. All of this is going on at the time. So the DOD, Homeland Security, both in December say, look, these aren't ours. We don't know what they are or whose they are, but they're not ours. And we don't think that they are a foreign adversary. Now, the interview that I referenced a few minutes ago that I did in October
Right.
with Colonel John Mills, he at that time believed that the drones that were seen over Langley were most likely a foreign adversary, China, Iran, maybe Russia. And then if you also remember at the beginning of when this whole thing flared up in 2024, we had this one Republican senator or representative, I don't Van something. Anyway, he says, hey, guess what? We've got a Iranian mothership off the coast of the eastern seaboard, and that's where these things are coming from. Bro, I don't think that was the case at all. And we never found that Iranian mothership. Now, I'm not saying that a foreign adversary couldn't have a boat offshore, but we never really found any concrete evidence that that was the case, that there was the Iranian mothership and the drones were being launched off there and they were coming in and doing whatever they were doing. So now the thing goes from November through December. Tens of thousands of people are seeing this. Mayors of all these counties in New Jersey are complaining to the U.S. government, hey, you help us out here. What the hell is going on in the above our houses? Our citizens are concerned. We're seeing them. Well, we don't get any answers. Like I say, the DOD says they're not theirs. Homeland Security says they're not theirs. And we don't think they're enemy aircraft, but we really know what they are. Okay. We go through Christmas, we go through New Year's, the fires happen here in LA, which has been a horrible event. But right after Trump is inaugurated, because he had been asked, hey, will you please get to the bottom of the drone issue? And he'd said before he was inaugurated, we will get to the bottom of it, right? So next thing you know, I don't remember which date it was, but this is about a week into this administration. The new press secretary comes out, starts, I've got my notes here, starts the meeting and says, hey, we found out that all of that drone activity, primarily in New Jersey, you know what? That was all okayed by the FAA. These are not the enemy. These drones were being used for research and various reasons. I kid you not. That's what she said, for research and other various reasons. Well, that didn't fly, I was about to say.
Yeah.
No intended, but I couldn't help myself. That didn't go over well with a lot of people, me included. I mean, I think that's just nonsense. However, what I think happened, at least the Trump administration, they said that they, we're going to get to the bottom of this. And probably, if I had to guess what happened, someone said to the administration, hey, look, you know what? Don't sweat it. These are ours. FAA knows all about it. They're doing research. It's all hunky dory.
On the up and up. Yeah.
It's all on the up and up. No enemies, no biggie. So the Trump administration thinks, you know what, we've got a lot to do. And clearly the last 2 or 3 weeks has been speed at which an administration has maybe never acted before. And I think my guess is that the Trump administration is like, look, you know what, we're going to take them at their word on this because we've got so many other things that we need to deal with right now that we're going to roll with that. So I don't think that the Trump administration is intentionally lying to the people. I think that that's what they were told by
the transition,
their own intergovernment.
Right.
I don't think it came from the Biden administration. I don't think the Biden administration had any clue what was going on, not only about this, but about many things. I think this was probably coming from other groups within government who were advising the administration saying, look, it's all cool. Don't sweat it. And I believe the Trump administration probably said, you know what, we're going to, if we have to, we'll address this again in the future. But for right now, we're going to take them at their word and roll with that. And I think that's why the new press secretary led with that on her first meeting right out the gate. It's not satisfactory to me. It's not satisfactory to a lot of people. I know that there are still mayors and a lot of people in New Jersey who are upset about this. I've been listening to interviews with them just in the last couple of days. They still don't know what it is. People are still seeing them. I get comments on my old videos on YouTube of people in that area who are still seeing these things. So although the activity seems to have receded, it is still happening. And I will also say this. Yes, it's true that probably some of this stuff was misidentified aircraft, some of it's hobbyists. And a lot of times, if you buy a red car, all of a sudden you begin to see red cars everywhere, right? Anything that we begin to think about, we begin to notice more. However, that does not, in my opinion, delegitimize the fact that God knows how many of these drones or whatever they were flying over Jersey, the East Coast,
Texas.
They were in UK. They were in South America. They were in many different places. And so, no, I'm not satisfied with that answer. And I hope that it will be readdressed.
It's interesting when we talk about this. I know that when I started seeing a lot of the key pieces of social media from all platforms starting to show individuals like, hey, what is going on? No one, being able to kind of give an insight to people like, this is over my home. I feel threatened, a gentleman, sadly arrested for shooting at a drone. Obviously that is, against the law. I know that he was trying to protect himself and his family and his land. I would say if you see something like this, make sure you call the FAA and say, hey, look, I see this drone. Call the local authorities and just say, hey, there's if you have a spot, you see a sighting of that nature. I know a lot of that has really changed, but I know that people were quite concerned, and it is alarming that a lot of this was kind of going to the wayside in regards to, like, yeah, kid, yeah, we get it. We get it. You know what I mean? Like, nothing this year, move along type of feel. And that doesn't sit well with a lot of people and a lot of Americans in general, like having questions in regards to this. Is this a foreign adversary? Is this, are we being threatened? Is this the United States actually saying, hey, look, we're working on some top secret stuff? And if that's the case, great. Are they working on, could it have been, for example, maybe it's, cell companies trying to test out their new, mobile devices in regards to putting up cellular things. I mean, I've seen that kind of thing before. But in regards to making people feel comfortable and at ease in their own home or within their own confines of their own space, look, we got to go with what the administration says. I'm glad that we were to get something from the administration, but I felt like it was just a nibble of a carrot, not enough information to say, you know what, as a conspiracy theorist, I'm like, okay, so what are we hiding? What's really going on? What is the United States government trying to do? Is it, again, like I said, the government knows what's going on. Obviously, it was a coordinated effort between whichever agency and the FAA, knowing what was exactly going on out there. And as I told people, like, are you worried? I'm like, I'm not worried. I try not to be, because there's so much other stuff going on in the world that that's not a huge concern. I mean, you go back and we look at the incidents, and I'm sure we even talked about this in past shows about the balloon. You go back and you're like, why the hell is this thing floating in our airspace when that should have been gone like ASAP, really
That
fast?
should have been taken out immediately. And
Yeah,
because we knew right away that that was a Chinese balloon. I don't remember how we knew that immediately, but we did. And so
right.
what did we do? We just let it literally traverse the entire
Half the country,
continental US
right?
from the west to the east. I mean, that was insane.
And then they
Now,
finally shot it out of the sky, or
yeah, then we finally shot it out of the sky, but that's after it's traversed the entire US
right.
and gotten intel on various military installations. And the thing about the FAA on this current situation that doesn't work for me is that when I did my first show on this in October, I found a website where you can get monthly you can download these Excel sheets in PDFs. And basically, they have a list of all of the drone activity over all major US cities. And at the time, so because I was preparing for this interview with Colonel Mills, and it was interesting because I was looking at various cities, and Chicago in particular had a gigantic amount of drone activity. And some of these drones are identified, some of them are unidentified, some of them have certain color characteristics. Anyway, long story short, the FAA has this catalog of reported drone activity over all these major cities. And if all of these drones that were occurring on the East Coast were in fact licensed and authorized by the FAA, then why in the hell did you allow them to shut down certain airstrips and military bases when when these were flying over them? So, I mean, so at what point are we supposed to believe that this part is not talking to this part? And if the FAA is knowledgeable about a program for whatever purpose, and we're now allowing military installations of our country that we maintain for our own self-defense to be shut down because they're not offering up the information about the things that they are now saying that they knew about, I mean, that just seems something is not right here. And it's well, another thing is just the safety aspect of this, right? So
Mm.
let's say if we've got all these thousands, hundreds of drones flying around, at what point does that begin to be a air safety issue? And clearly this month of January has been a terrible month for awareness of an aircraft accidents, which have been a real tragedy. So I'm just saying that the more stuff you have flying around, and we're not telling, you know, local military and local airports about these things, then to me that increases the likelihood of accidents within the sky. And I'm not saying that drones had anything to do with these three recent tragedies. I'm just saying, I'm just putting it out there that if there's things flying around in the sky, that everybody needs to know about it. If I'm flying into LAX or LaGuardia or wherever it is, and there's a bunch of unknown nonsense flying around, that doesn't make me feel good as a air consumer.
Sure. People can send us texts at 775-990-5151. We are getting a couple texts coming in, Michael. A guy from Tacoma is listening in and says, over the past few weeks, my neighbor and I have been witnessing some quite unusual things going on in the night sky. We've seen multiple drones in as large as small cars flying and performing what looks like what are they say here? Lights that are red, green, and white. These
Mhm.
drones have been spotted near the Tacoma Narrows Bridge Commencement Bay area and even near our home. Interesting. I know federal officials assure that the drones are no threat, but they reported them, and that's according. That's great. I'm glad the neighbors, people who are listening, are able to report that stuff. But still, it doesn't make you feel easy. I will say this: I know I was resting here at my home, and I live close to the airport, and I would say that I'm sure, just like everyone else, with watching the headline news, that I would say that your sense of a heightened awareness of traveling is quite different right now, and we'll
Yeah.
continue to talk about that as we continue with the show. But I was like, the pattern on how they fly over West Seattle, this area is typically quiet, and so I'm watching the pattern. I hear this and I was like, that's not normal. That's either a fighter jet, or that's a plane going the wrong direction. So I open my sliding glass door and I look out and I see the plane flying over. But as I'm watching, he looks like he's coming from Boeing Field, but to me, it looks like he may have taken off the wrong direction, because all the planes were coming from the north to land at SeaTac. So he took off, jammed to head west, but he flew over our place. And I was like, couldn't find any information in regards to it. But again, Michael, it from the last couple months just hasn't, even as a consumer of flying and having to go places, I haven't felt. I was like, damn, there's a lot of things going on in the aviation world. Planes falling out of the sky, you got planes running off, running in the, there's so much going on. Planes running off runways, things of that nature. It just seems like there's so much going on in the regard in the world of the aviation stuff, that just doesn't make you as a consumer feel at ease, when you're like, this has not been an issue, and it's still typically the safest way to travel and to
Mhm.
get places at a well, I wouldn't say almost, but to get places that you need to get to, within a 6 hour period, or a 3 hour or 4 hour benchmark. So it's quite interesting, with what's been going on. I know we can definitely talk about the DC crash and the conspiracy theories on what's been going on with that. But it has been quite an interesting, I would say, like 3 months right now, just a 3 month window of aviation be so highlighted in the news lately.
It is. And the, this morning, because I was thinking about the show today,
Hmm.
and I was thinking, I wonder how many air traffic accidents happen annually to U.S. aircraft. And so I started looking it up, and the numbers were surprising to me because I haven't looked it up in the past. And it may surprise you. On average, we have about 1,200 aircraft accidents per year to US related aircraft. And of those roughly 1,200 per year, 200 to 250 of them will be fatal. Now, most of those accidents will be related to kind of general aviation, which is small planes, private planes. And as you mentioned, professional or what's the word I'm looking for? More major airlines. It is really, really safe. But I guess what I was surprised about is because I think that we're not unlike many people. When you hear of three very tragic accidents in a matter of weeks to start a year off, it catches your attention and you're like, well, I wonder what's going on. And not to minimize those, because they're terrible tragedies, but we do still have, it's nothing's perfect. And there's car crashes, there's air crashes, and we still have accidents. But by and large, it's an extremely safe manner of transportation. And when I was thinking about the drones, so when we had the fires here,
Right.
some guy, and he just was in court like this past week. So when we had these terrible fires here in LA, we had super scoopers, right? So they're coming in and they're trying to grab the water and they're trying to put out these flames in Palisades. Some guy, numerous people were flying drones, which was completely unhelpful. But anyway, one guy who turned out to be a pretty well-to-do filmmaker here in LA, he flew a drone that impacted with one of these super scoopers and put it out of commission almost within the first night or two of the fires. And I've seen the picture of the super scooper. So it only had a a medium-sized hole within the wing structure of the Super Scooper, but that eliminated it from being able to do its job and try to help us here in LA with putting out these fires. So drone activity with aircraft is an issue. It's something we have to take seriously. And to the FAA and to drone operators, I would say, listen, I hope that we're all on the same page here and the FAA is authorizing these drones. And to the people who are hobbyists or whatever, I'm not trying to villainize or make this accuse anybody, but this is a serious issue. And, we have to pay attention because accidents happen.
As you say that, someone who owns a small little drone, just being, I've only used it a handful of time, but even flying within my own area, because I am so close to SeaTac Airport and, adjacent airports, that I only have a threshold within my own drone to go a certain height. After that, the drone will not fly anymore and it will actually return. Thankful for those who aren't, beginner drone users. It's interesting how maybe the different manufacturers didn't go ahead and put a bubble around the LA area where the fires were to say, you know what, no drone should be flying, because you have the capability to say, you know what, you know, and maybe they did. And prior to that accident, and me not having the information and looking that up, but them saying, you know what, there's a threshold, you can't fly within this certain amount of, there's a benchmark now. Okay, this is where the fire's at. You can't fly right now. And I know that these different, drone manufacturers have the ability within their own software to restrict drones, such as myself, who's very, novice, to, the pros who are running very large drones, who have their pilot's license. I do not, because I don't fly. I'm flying a smaller minimum little drone. And I'll be honest with you. I mean, I bought it and I've used it maybe like a handful of times, and it sits because I haven't been using it for what I want to use it for, like that whole unsolved mysteries where I'm walking with my big old, like trench coat, and you hear the doof, 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 and, me trying to, pretend like I'm walking in the mysterious night with my coat. And at least that's how I pictured it. And
Sure.
it hasn't worked out great for me, but it is, there with, things going on, such as the fires in LA, the manufacturers being able to do this, and maybe they did, and I just don't know or have any information at this point, how they could lock that down and, prevent, a tragedy where a drone strike hits a plane and disables the plane. So moving forward, hopefully, these companies will say, oh, I almost swore, oh, shoot, maybe we should, let's go ahead and put, a protective bubble around this certain area, because they are flying low. They're, down to 400 feet, which is, and these guys are doing some dicey maneuvers. Those airspace should be cleared for that type of work, medical, emergency, bucket dumping, things of that nature. Our guest tonight, Michael Parker, joining us. You can follow him on Twitter at Michael Parker LA. It's been a while since we've had you on the show. I mean, so much has come and gone, and new administrations here. I just feel like with everything that's been going on, the different conspiracies, we haven't really talked, we should talk about maybe the DC plane strike, since we've been talking about this. What's interesting to me about this, that there has been a trend in regards to the DC crash, sparking conspiracies, with the recent crash in DC, has generated conspiracy theories, that has been circulating, leading to the collision of the military helicopter. It's interesting because you see it from all walks of life. They're like, oh, they were paid $1 million. The guy, oh yeah, there was one that was out there saying that the guy who was flying the Doom chopper was paid $1 million because there was somebody on the jet that had information that they wanted erased. It's so tragic because people's lives were lost. It's unfortunate, things will continue to come out, but to me, and I think this is something that we've covered from way back in the day to now, that the conspiracies are always interesting, but some of these are just so outlandish in regards to, that was someone's husband or wife, or, that people, people's lives were lost. Super unfortunate on what happened and how, and I hope that they come to the bottom of, get to the bottom of something like this, and, restricting the airspace and knowing that DC, that area is so congested and in a busy airspace. You got restriction areas, and you got people trying to land at at the airport there close in Dulles. Um, what were your thoughts on that day, on that tragedy?
So when that happened, I was actually traveling, and I was in Texas at that point. I was seeing my father, and we are working on some things together, so I was not able to stay on top of it. But here's what my observations were that I thought were odd. And first of all, my heart goes out to the families, and there was these these kids and their mothers. There was part of the skating team. I mean, it's absolutely tragic, and it's absolutely tragic for the families of the people who were on the helicopter. So we cannot understate that. But here's what I thought was strange about it
Sure.
was that immediately pretty soon, within the hours after this tragedy, they said who the two male pilots of the helicopter were. And then they said the third member of the helicopter team is unidentified. And then in a day or so, they said, we are withholding the name of the third pilot of the helicopter team the family has asked for us not to release the names.
Sure.
In the meantime, there's these rumors online that this third member of the team was a woman. And then
Ah,
one night there was the rumor that we now know who this female pilot was, and it was a trans woman, I believe, named Joe Ellis. Well, that was incorrect. A lot of people rolled with this, and they were talking about it. The next day, she posts a very somber and brief video saying, "Hey, look, I've been notified that people think that I was on board that helicopter. I was not." And then within a couple of days after that, they released the name of the third pilot, who does in fact turn out to be a woman. Anyway, what to me was unusual was like, I don't know, and I'm no expert on this, but I don't really remember a time when a accident of this magnitude happens that we hold back information at the request of a family member. I think that typically what they do is they reach out to the family first and explain, we regret to inform you that there has been um, a
that's
death
right.
of your family member, and we release the information kind of semi simultaneously. But the fact that they announced the names of these two male members, and then later, and I'm not saying anything, I don't know what that means. I just, in the days that it was happening, I was like, I don't know that I've ever heard of this before. And that being said, I don't have any inside information on this other than I thought that that was really strange. And I will also say that when things like this happen and you hold back that information, it makes people begin wonder like what's going on here, and then they begin to fill in their own details. Now,
Sure.
the only thing that I can understand about this that I keep hearing is that the helicopter was flying 100 plus feet or so above where it should have been. But it's absolutely tragic. It was terrible.
It's interesting because you were talking about that, and yes, I would say the same thing. To add to your point there, Michael, there was a tragic accident here during the Christmas holiday here, down by Mount St. Helens, Mount Rainier, and Mount Adams, where there were two individuals that were researchers, or I don't know what you want to call them. They were Sasquatch enthusiasts that were out hiking, and they died of the element. But here's the interesting part of the whole
I kind
situation.
of beginning to remember this. Go ahead.
They died of exposure was what they said, right? But guess what? The names were not released. And I thought that was quite strange that the names were not released. So I started asking around and was like, what gives? The same as what you're asking. Why wouldn't the names be released? Why wouldn't they like, okay, so two individuals died. Okay, that really sucks. And we had a guy come on who Tobe Johnson came on the show to talk about it, and we kind of looked at the area, and we know that there was a lot of it was rich in Sasquatch sightings. But it's unfortunate that they died of the element. I'm like, man, that's interesting. Um, that no information other than that the two individuals had passed away. I know that they were from Oregon, so I don't know if there's an Oregon law that states that they don't need to, identify the bodies or identify the names or share the names. There may be a different, law in Oregon that may, and so I didn't really look into that any further. I was like, okay, well, if they're not releasing it, I just thought it was just as you're saying, very strange that why wouldn't you? Okay, if they just died of exposure, why aren't you giving the names? But kind of looking at the map and looking at the topography, something didn't pass a sniff test, you know. Um, but it makes you think. It makes you ask questions like, "What's really going on? Why are we not?"
And they did release those people's information later, right? Because it happened, I think, on Christmas Day or Christmas Eve or
Yeah,
something.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, going back through that just really just made me think. I'm like, what? Why were they holding that? And by the time we had done the show, that information still hadn't been released. Um, but they eventually, I believe, they said how old the victims were, but they didn't give names at that point in time. Just what a sad situation. And so that made me think of what you were just saying in regards to what was going on for the DC stuff. Michael, as you know, we continue to cover a lot of conspiracies, and I kind of going back real quick. I mean, it just seems like everyone's been getting sick lately, and I think one before we go to that, I just my heart goes out to everyone a part of the LA fires. And what's interesting to me about the LA fire is that the conspiracies that have started to flourish and arise now that things have kind of kind of calm down. But what's interesting and what like my heart was just like broken, like how does this happen? You know,
Exactly.
you're like, where's the water at? How come, we're in a time of, like, why isn't rain? Obviously, the weather hasn't been a factor in regards to playing in favor of helping give relief to areas of the this tragic accident, or this tragic thing that has gone through. I mean, it wild, because you start to look at the biggest conspiracies are starting to arise of they did this because they wanted a land grab in regards to changing how this is going to look for the topography. This was politically driven, and it's like, again, like I always tell everyone, is like, damn, some of these conspiracies are so, I've been trying to come to grips with a lot of them, but man, some of them are so out there. It's interesting to me. And someone like yourself, who's been a part of the LA community base, who is there, and has been a part of this community for such a long time. Michael, share your insights on that time and what has arose post what was going on during those wildfires.
I have lived here since 1990. I've lived through the LA riots. I lived through the Northridge quake. I've lived through, well, when I say lived through, I mean I was here,
Yeah.
and numerous fires, including some really, really bad fires just from 2017 on, that were in the Malibu and the Palisades, or more the Malibu kind of area. Um, Out of all the things, and then when George Floyd happened, we had massive rioting here. That came on the backside of the COVID issue. Like all of a sudden, oh, you don't have to stand, 6 feet apart anymore and wear masks. You can just run them in the streets and steal, things out of ransacked buildings. Out of all the things that I have seen in Los Angeles, I would say that this was the most profoundly sad thing that I have ever witnessed for this city, because the damage is of such an astronomical level. This will be the most expensive. Now, was it arson? Was it the Santa Ana winds? That's another issue. And I do have ideas and thoughts on that. But regardless, this will be, let's just say for the sake of argument, it was just straight up natural wildfires. I'm sorry, there's something in here that's making me almost sneeze right now. So I hope I don't sneeze. I'm losing my point. This is going to be the most expensive tragedy from a financial. This is going to be worse than Katrina. You think of hurricanes, you think of earthquakes, you think of Northridge earthquake, all of that will pale in comparison to what the cost of the LA fires are going to be. It's going to be hundreds of billions of dollars. Everybody in LA knows someone who lost their home in this situation. And the other thing that's weird about it was when this thing happened, because I have two friends in particular who live in the Palisades area. One lost their home. One, miraculously, their home survived. And it's just the damage from the Palisades fire, the Eaton fire, and the subsequent fires that happened. There was numerous fires that happened over that week or so. Now, mind you, also, it was only a few days ago that these fires were completely contained. Imagine that. This thing happens on January 7th. And even after we finally had some rain, like a week or so, these fires were not completely contained until a few days after the rain. That's how big this was. And I mean, it's just an absolute tragedy. And what you were talking about as far as the reservoirs, I mean, listen, that's real. 170 million gallon reservoir was completely dry. And you know what? Governor Newsom and Mayor Karen Bass should have both resigned. And if they are not going to resign, then we should at least try to recall them. And if we cannot recall them, then we need to vote them out because, and there was multiple levels of incompetence on this, but this is an there were so many things that went wrong in the response to the fires. It's unimaginable. And I would say, if you want to know what some people think about the fire, how it happened, I would guide you toward my friend who runs a website called the Duke Report. And Peter Duke has done some great work on this. Unfortunately, he lost his home there. But if you want to, it's his story to tell. It is not mine. But he's done some very deep research on the Palisades fires. And my father has property in Maui in the Wailea area. So what was it, 2 years ago when the Lahaina fire happened? And again, it was one of those situations where so many things went wrong that you almost can't help but think, okay, how many accidents, how many mistakes, one after another, can happen before we're leaning away from this all just being coincidence and error to it being something else. So, and in both cases, you're looking at Lahaina, you're looking at the Pacific Palisades. This is some of the most desirable real estate within the United States of America, if not the world. So my heart breaks for the people of Altadena, of Palisades, of all the areas where thousands, tens of thousands of homes burnt to the ground and there is nothing. And even now, my mayor, Karen Bass, and our governor, Gavin Newsom, have just done an absolutely terrible job in dealing with this. And it's been one of the worst things I've ever seen.
We do have a quick coverage of the map that I found on the website of Cal Fire, the Cal Fire website of the Palisades fire. It's just incredible to see how much devastation happened during this tremendous loss for so many people. And it's interesting because a lot of people who don't live in this area, and look, we know that a lot of this area is homes to very rich people, but there are working class individuals that are part of this community as well. And it's
I would say mostly working class, because the Palisades, yes, it's very desirable and there are some rich people there. There's probably some rich people in Altadena as well, but most of these people are working class, middle class people. So it's not just some stereotypical, playground of the rich and famous. It's regular people that lost everything.
Our guest this evening, Michael Parker, you can follow him on Twitter at Michael Parker LA. He is on YouTube. You can watch his show, Michael Parker Media. Michael, do you feel like right now with everything that's been going on, do you feel like the conspiracy world has been kind of tame? Do you feel like it's been on an upper tick where you feel like from I would say the last 5 years? Can you believe it's been 5 years since we started doing these, the interviews together, these shows together? Do you feel like back in the day during like the 2020, those conspiracies were more raw? Or do you feel like now the conspiracies have been, do you feel like they're more enhanced in regards to being more far fetched? I guess in the world of conspiracies from 2020 to 2025, where do you feel like we're at right now? Do you feel like it's way over the top, or do you feel like 2020 was like, God, Jesus, man. You know what I mean?
I know what you mean, but I have a different take on it.
Sure.
So to me, like, I don't like the term conspiracy theory.
I don't either.
And here's the deal. It's like that was created as a term to kind of get people to discourage people from asking questions and having critical thought. What I would like to remind people is that there's all kinds of people in the world. You know, we're approaching 8 billion people or something on this planet. There's good people, there's bad people. Every day, if you watch the news, you're going to see bad people that have done bad things. Well, that is not restricted to the lower side, the lower aspect of the financial world, right? I mean, there's good and bad people of all stripes and of all financial demographics. What I'm trying to say is that this idea of conspiracies, what you might think is something that you could never do, well, somebody else could very easily do it. And just because you can't imagine that someone would do such a thing doesn't mean that that's out of the possibility for others to do. And it depends on what is normal for you. We all have our own normalcy bias, I think is the term, where, okay, I can accept this much, but I can't accept that. And so what I'm seeing now is just a continuation of, I don't really think of conspiracy theories as that far out. It depends on what it is. I'm not a flat earther.
What?
But the general term of conspiracy theory, I just look at it more like this is what happened here. Why would it happen? I look more at the strategy. If someone was going to do something, or if this purported event happened, why would that have happened? You know, the old phrase, cui bono, you know, who benefits, right? So to me, I think there's more good people in the world than bad people, but you know what? There's some bad people, and those bad people can get up to a lot of bad things. And I think that we're in a place now where, because of the internet and because of 500 channels of cable television, we have more hyper focus on things that are happening right now and happening across the globe. It's like we were talking about with these terrible air tragedies. Well, 3 tragedies in a month is really terrible. But if you go and look at those statistics, where we typically have 1,200 air accidents of some sort
Right.
with U.S. related aircraft in a year, you're like, okay, well, actually, while it's terrible, I didn't have the entire story, right? I didn't know how much of this happens. And still, that's not that much out of the entire scope of air travel. So when it gets back to the conspiracy theories, or, you know, is it ramping up? Is it decreasing? I think that people are just beginning to want to know more. I think that this is all, what used to be fringe is now mainstream. My wife laughs at me because I have a deep interest in all of this, and I have a extremely deep interest in the UFO, ET, UAP question, right?
Right.
And so sometimes I'll read somebody who's talking about something. For example, there's a folk rock singer called Father John Misty, and my daughter loves this guy, and he's a really smart dude. Anyway, a couple of days ago, he posted something. What was it? I can't. It had to do with Diana Pasulkas, and it was pretty inside baseball for UFO type stuff. And I was like, whoa, who knew? Like, Father John Misty knows about this deep UFO stuff. And my wife looks at me, she just laughs. She's like, come on. That's mainstream now. My point is that things that were absolutely, completely verboten in the past, you could not talk about that. You can't come to Thanksgiving. And it's gotten worse, but now it's more like tribalized. Oh, well, you voted for Trump, you can't come to Thanksgiving, or vice versa, or what? Oh, you're not vaxxed, or whatever it is. But my point is, now all of this is very much part of our cultural conversation that we're having, where in the past, No, we're imagining the guy in the basement eating Cheetos, and looking up, UFO sightings or whatever. So
Being a kind of
I'm rambling. I'm saying no. I don't think it's increasing. I think our awareness of these things is increasing.
I would challenge you, Michael, to say I think maybe that what it is more critical thinking, asking questions. I think maybe that's what we would be, like, what the hell was that? You know what I mean?
I
Right.
think that's what I'm trying to.
Yeah.
I think we're saying the same thing.
Yeah, for sure. Uh, Going back to your artists there, Tom DeLonge, all these different artists, sharing their insight and different individuals coming out to share. If it's I can't, my mind goes blank as I people will come up to you like, oh, have you heard the information from X, Y, and Z? And I can't even think of the guy's name. All these different guys that have been sharing their insight to, what is, of that fascination of the UFO, the UFO, or the UAPs and things of that nature. And it feels like we're so close on the fringe to figuring out what's going on. The same thing with the elusive Bigfoot. Go ahead.
Well, by the way, I'm pro Bigfoot. I don't know if Bigfoot exists, but I hope Bigfoot exists. How
Yeah.
awesome would that be? But what I just remembered
Right.
is okay. So here's something that happened this week that's cool and not depressing. Um,
Because
Repres
right now, I think everything we need a cool story.
so Representative Paulina Luna, who
Uh-huh.
is Republican House of Representatives person from Florida, made this announcement last week. Now, we may end up being disappointed, but back to our UFO UAP thing and this being mainstream. To her credit, she, along with Tim Burkett and some other people, have really been pushing the UAP disclosure story within the U.S. Government. I big respect for that. Anyway, she said, I believe on Monday or Tuesday of this past week on Twitter, if I can find her exact quote, here's her statement. I have an announcement that will impact the entire nation. The press conference date will be announced soon. And then this other representative, this guy named Jared Makaskowitz, replied, and he's another person who's been part of these UAP hearings, said, quote, I know. So immediately UAP, UFO, Twitter, X, whatever, everybody's like, oh my God, I hope it's like a UAP disclosure. And then today, there was some clarification where it said whatever is going to be announced will happen on Tuesday afternoon. She said 3 p.m. She's on the East Coast, so I'm assuming that's 3 p.m. Tuesday, East Coast. Now, will this be UAP related? I would love for that to be the case. I don't know what it's going to be related to, but I am pretty sure it's going to be related to government transparency and these things that we've not talked about in the past. I hope it doesn't turn out to be an overdramatic nothing burger, but this will be whatever it is that she's going to announce, and she's announcing it, I believe, on behalf of other members of the government. She's been kind of chosen to make whatever statement this is. But I do think it will be about government transparency. And so far this month, that's really what this is all about. All these things that have been obscured eventually are coming to the light, and people can get bent out of shape about Doge all day if they want to. But you know what? The drapes are being pulled, and we're being able to see what's under the hood and what's been done. And I look forward to hearing what Representative Luna says on Tuesday, whether it's related to UAP or some other act or some other facet of something that needs to be discussed openly.
Well, in your thoughts or you sharing that piece, it made me think like, okay, I'm ready to know what's been going on at Area
Me
50.
too.
These different. I want to know about the Murray Island incident. As I point, if you're watching the show, I'm pointing in the direction of Maury Island over by Vashon Island. That was the incident that happened where J. Edgar Hoover sent the men in black to go figure out what was going on. But what's interesting to me about that piece and that story, because I know that there used to be a museum here, and we've covered it. These two individuals that who had a museum here, and just like everything else, shutting down during COVID. shared their stories. And how did J. Edgar Hoover even know about the Maury Island incident? Because when you think about it, back in those days, I
I
mean,
think he knew about everything at that point. I mean, he
yeah,
was tapped into everything for
for
better
sure,
or worse.
right. So I was like, wow, this is interesting. But it will be interesting to hear the stories about the stuff over at Mount Rainier, the stuff at Roswell, here locally, all the all the UFO UAP stuff that may have happened. Was this, to find out, like, hey, look, wouldn't it be interesting to say, hey, look, the government comes out and say, look, we've been working with aliens for decades, and they've been helping us, build these stealth fighters and things of that. I mean, my mind would just be like, I'd be like, okay, I kind of had an idea. Like, how do you go from a horse carriage and buggy from the 1900s to, a stealth bomber in the early 90s or late 80s, early 90s with this B-2 bomber that came out? You're like, what the is that? It just, the technology and investments during that time frame was just astronomically huge. So that's why I'm like, oh, this would be awesome. And I know you've talked about that in other shows that you've done in the past, in regards to our evolution and how we, either reversed engineer things of that nature. So it will be interesting to hear, to see if maybe we get some other cool nuggets in regards to that. Thoughts before we head over, because I want to talk about the JFK files before we
Sure.
head out.
I don't know what it is that she's going to say on Tuesday. I'm all ears, very excited.
Sure.
I want to hear it. But disclosure in general. Okay, well, here's another thing. Because another thing that people are talking about right now is that there is a Steven Spielberg film that's going to come out, I believe, in 2026. And we all know who Steven Spielberg is, right? I mean, Close Encounters, E.T. Yeah, yeah, a huge filmmaker, right? So
Right.
anyway, he's making this new film. I don't know what the original title was supposed to be. We had all heard that it was going to be some kind of a ET alien related UFO kind of movie. And now all of a sudden they're saying that the movie has been retitled to Disclosure.
Ooh.
So, and that's all over X right now. So who knows? I mean, some people have long thought that Steven Spielberg was part of the, what's the word I want to say, acclimating us to the idea
Sure.
of this. And what if this movie that's about to come out is another piece of that? I don't know. I'm all ears. I'm fascinated by the subject. And so that's kind of all I have on that for a second.
I'm nervous, but I'm excited, in regards to, what's going to be posted out there, or what we're going to hear as things to continue to evolve with this new administration, sharing and kind of pull, like as you said, pull back the curtain to reveal some stuff that has been a long time in waiting for, just some answers in regards to what's been going on. Our guest tonight, Michael Parker, joining us from Michael Parker Media. You can find him on Twitter, on his Twitter handle at Michael Parker LA. Michael, I know that we've talked about this on previous shows, and I don't want to say it's exhausting, but I would say fascinating, from the umbrella theory to the grassy knoll theory to the Secret Service agent turning around and shooting JFK, to the to the perch, to the guy smoking the cigarettes behind the grassy knoll, to the shots that were taken possibly by Lee Harvey Oswald from the book. I want to say
Deposit.
suppository. Well, well, eh, yes, from
That'd
the,
be rough, right?
yeah, it would be depository. God, do you feel like now that uh, the executive action order that was signed by our president right now, Donald Trump, back on January 23rd, asking the department, the office of director of national intelligence, to put together a plan and get it to his desk. And I know that that plan has been delivered to the White House, but the declassification could be delayed. What's your thoughts on this whole thing? What do you think? Do you think they're going to redact anything in this and in these final documents?
Well, first of all, I support the release of all this information on JFK, on
MLK,
MLK,
right?
9/11, anything that has been obscured from us, I would like to see the truth. The Epstein files, a whole 9 yards. And I saw that some
Stand by
people
real quick. If you're listening to us on one of our platforms, you should go and download the Patreon version. We're going to continue our conversation on the Patreon. So if you're not listening, go check us out. Go subscribe on the Patreon piece. You can get a little extra bonus with Michael Parker and myself. Michael, continue on with your conversation.
So I know that some people had responded to you on TikTok that they were more interested in hearing about the Epstein files than the JFK thing.
Sure.
So here's where I am not super optimistic, because a president can sign an executive order asking for the declassification of something, but man, I don't have a great deal of faith in the existent deep state just handing over its information that it is now obscured for, what is it, 70 some odd years.
Yeah.
I don't want it to be redacted, but I'm not super optimistic. And I want to be totally wrong about this. I want to be completely wrong. I want the information to come out. I'm going to wait and see. I mean, I want it to come out because secrets are harmful and they metastasize over time. And there is, these kind of things are why people have an animosity towards the government, because they feel like, okay, well, you've got JFK, you killed MLK, you've got this Epstein thing, you've got this 9/11 situation, you've got the Diddy files, you've got all these things that we don't really know what exactly happened on, and you seem to not want to talk about it very much. So this upsets people. And what do they say, that truth is the best sunshine, or sunshine is, anyway, yes, this information should come out. I'm not super optimistic that it will, despite the intentions of the current administration.
When you say that, I feel like I know that stuff has been released by this administration previously to coming back to office. Stuff being redacted. It will be interesting to hear what's going to happen with the MLK files, and the RFK files as well.
Now, let me just interject. My understanding is that some of the MLK information has come out, but it was more seedy information just about his life and things like that. And I'm a fan of MLK, and I believe that we are all flawed humans. Let he who is without sin cast the first stone, right?
Right.
But that's different from actual information about the assassination itself. And so my concern is that stuff will come out about JFK that, we may get some additional information, but it's not the information that we really, really want, which is, how did this thing happen? Who was behind it, et cetera. And I just want to reiterate, I hope that I'm wrong.
It's interesting because you say that, because when you start to when I hear you say that, Michael, it goes back to a character assassination. And look, these individuals have been passed away for such a long time. Look, yeah. And whatever is going on behind closed doors for any of these three individuals, their business, not mine. Clearly, way before my time. I'm not going to judge anybody, because I don't want someone judging me in regards to what I'm doing. In those types of circumstances, look, I think that the American public wants to know what happened.
Absolutely.
Is the American public hear me out real quick?
Sure.
Is the American public really ready for the information? They're like, oh my God, let's just throw something out there, like real quick, just for talking purposes. We find out that JFK was killed by, assassinated by the mob, because they weren't happy with, that RFK was coming after, the mob had felt like they had something to do with, him going into office as a young sitting president. This is just a hypothetical story that this may not have any, factual information, but what if it was the mob that, said, you know what? he bit the hand that fed him. You know what I mean? And that's why you see that JFK and RFK had said, you know what, we're going to make you unalive, and say, and that's what they did. It was the mob that took them out. Maybe they were pissed that they were sleeping with Marilyn Monroe. Who knows? If that was a thing too. I don't know. That's just a theory out there.
So I think what you're asking me is, do you think that the American public is ready for this? Well, I think they are. And I mean, just last year, another interview that I did, and once again, I'm embarrassed, I can't remember this gentleman's name. He's an excellent journalist. He wrote a book that was developed into a television show that I believe was on HBO or Showtime this past year, and it was called Mafia Spies. And in that book, he basically lays out the story. There's no question. There were, I believe, Alan Dulles and some of these people in the early days, they had reached out to mafiosos. Hey, look, we want to do this thing. Do you want to partner with us? And so there's no question that was happening. My question would be, like, who else was involved? So I think the American public has already kind of digested that and knows that it's true. And they know that the longer you don't tell us the truth, the worse it gets. But I think that the American public has accepted that. And in the first Trump administration, it is my understanding that, because he wanted to release the JFK information then. It is my understanding that I believe, Mike Pompeo, who I was not a fan of, I believe his position was Secretary of State. Anyway, my understanding, I could be wrong on that. I can't remember his exact position, but my understanding is that he was the guy that said to Trump, don't do it. Do not release the information. And since then, Trump and Pompeo are no longer friendly, and his security classifications were taken away, which clearly depicts to me that Mike Pompeo and the rest of the infrastructure, they're guarding their own per usual. But in regards to the JFK thing, yes, I definitely think that America's ready. And I think most of America and the world already knows what kind of happened. Now, the particulars.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll figure that out. Anything from, the industrial complex to who knows what it could be. Michael Parker, it's always a pleasure to have you come and hang out with us. It's what a fascinating time. It's always fun to go over some of these different things that are in the headline news. Unfortunate for you. I'm glad that you and your family are safe.
Thank you.
I hope that this heightened awareness of what, hey, if I should have that one guy who came on the show like a long time ago, the geoengineering the storms. Why didn't they geoengineer a storm to make it rain? You know what I mean? So that
what if they geoengineered a fire?
Oh, I mean,
And bro, I'm not saying that's what happened, but look, nothing would surprise me. And these fires were terrible. And I would just, like I say, if I had to point to someone who has an idea, I would say, if any of your listeners are interested in the subject, go to the Duke Report. It's a friend of mine that I've known for 20 plus years, extremely intelligent. He lost his home and he's done some very good journalism on what he believes is how this happened. I don't know that it's true. What I do know is that there were a lot of things that went wrong that should not have gone wrong. And how many things can go wrong before it looks like that's really an unlikely chain of events.
Our guest tonight, Michael Parker Media. You can find him on Twitter, X, at Michael Parker LA. You can find him on YouTube, streaming on different platforms. Again, always a pleasure to have you on. Thank you for taking the time to hang out with us to discuss all these lovely topics. I look forward to seeing what happens here in the next few weeks. Again, thank you so much for coming to hang out with us. If you have insights to what's been going on, maybe you want to share something with Michael Parker or myself, we'll have all the information available on our podcast. You can go to your favorite podcasting platform and search US Phenomenon with Mario Magana, or just go to onairmario.com and click on the podcast link to subscribe. For my entire team, Mark Christopher, Sophia Magana, and myself, Mario Magana, be sure to look up at the sky, because you never know what you might see. Good night.